If you're wearing yours, I'm wearing mine.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. Cool. All right, Riley from Desecrator, welcome to Nightbreed. How's it going, man?
Thanks, man. It's really good. It's a sunny day in Melbourne, which doesn't happen as much in winter, so it's positive vibes, man.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well, if we start from the start, how'd you guys get together?
It's a very long time ago now. 2008, the band was conceived. I was overseas playing some shows in another band, and after those shows were done, I went to a couple of festivals. It was my first time in Europe, and I went to Manowar's festival, Magic Circle of all things, and there was a secret show by Death Angel played at that festival. It was unannounced on the festival, and they didn't play on the main grounds. They played in a tiny little scout hall off to the side of the main festival. And after 3 days of Manowar hailing and killing, and everything that goes along with that, to watch Death Angel play a tiny little hall to maybe 300 people in a festival that had maybe 20,000 people, it was one of those little epiphany moments that there's nothing more real than thrash, and it was time. So I came back to Melbourne and started a band, and the rest went from there.
Awesome, man. So do you, the guys that you joined the band in, did you know them beforehand, or you just kind of were you looking for musos to play thrash with?
No, I put a band together. The first Desecrators had about 3 lineups now, but the first wave of guys, I was looking for a band to play the songs that I was writing after that inspiration, and with no real intention of putting an Australian band together. I don't think we'd ever really, at the time, I really just wanted to put something together and go back to Europe and try and get something going there straight away. The dudes I found who played it just kind of naturally of their own decision, wanted to be part of it and wanted to stay, and I ended up with a band in Australia faster than I thought I would, and that was the band for the Live Till Death release, the demo we did, and I think that band did a fair bit of early national touring and one international, but then the guys moved on of their own kind of timeline and it got into phase 2.
Yeah, cool. Going back to that Live Till Death, how'd you go, like, recording a live show? I mean, I've recorded stuff, but never a live gig. How's that, like, mixing and all that kind of gear? Yeah.
It was hectic. At the time, it was really a big thing for us to release a live album, because I remember that bands, and especially Australian bands in the kind of newer thrash genre, seemed to be all within a ballpark of each other sound-wise. The recordings were very the same, the drums were very the same, and it had a very, very edited and Pro Tools feel to it. And we couldn't connect with it. We all agreed that that wasn't what really drove us as a band. Like, we didn't have those aspirations for studio trickery. We wanted that organic, real, live experience, because thrash metal to us was such an energetic and live genre that I guess that was our motivation to do it, was to get the band tight enough and get the band stage confident enough that we could do something like that and release it without having to manipulate it, and show people what they'd get if they came to shows, because all we wanted to do was tour. So that was our live album. We at the time, there was a venue called the Art House in Melbourne, which was a very famous punk and metal venue. They happened to be set up with a multi-core that went to a room upstairs that they could capture that type of thing. And then we got in touch with a German producer at the time called Harris Johns. He'd done, famously Australian, he'd done Hobbs Angel of Death, but he'd also done Sodom, Creator, some Sepultura, I think. A lot of 80s stuff, a lot of back in the day stuff, and he did a lot of the raw stuff that we liked. So we got in touch with him and he understood the project. So we sent it over to him to mix it after it was recorded, and that's the result.
Yeah, nice. That's cool.
It was, yeah, I remember we did a lot of rehearsing. We were shitting ourselves about it because it was a live show. It had a crowd, and we wanted to entertain people while they were there. But at the same time, in the back of your head, you go, "And this is it. This is one shot. There's no second go." And I remember, I think that energy. If you listen to it, the songs are just so fucking fast, and that was the result of it. Well, I think we were just shitting ourselves so much that we got up there and we just hyperspeed the thing, but it was a moment in time, It was a moment, and it was a moment that people seemed to dig. The album did well, and off we went.
Yeah, cool. So you guys played Southeast Asia around that time, yeah? How do those crowds?
Yeah,
the bunch of thrash heads over there. They're into it.
yeah. Back then, that was a big thing for us. Not a lot of Australian bands had started going to Southeast Asia. It was the market hadn't opened up for a lot of promoters to take Aussie bands over there, so it was still pretty kind of underground level touring. I got most of the contacts that we did it through were through the punk scene over there and through the kind of the local metal scene dudes. Yeah, again, it's a long time ago, but they were cool shows, man. They, the passionate fans. That was the first time we ever got bootlegged. That was the first time we ever got death threats and had to cancel shows. It was the first time we ever had religious protests trying to keep us out of the country. Man, heaps of stuff happened on that tour. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. And we still, even to this day, there's still dudes will message me who were there for that. And they're really proud that they were there in that kind of first tour and launching of Desecrator overseas. It was, yeah, it was a fun time, man. It really kind of bedded the band in. And I guess for me, that was the first taste I had of what the international market was going to be like to play heavy metal in, and I just wanted more. So that for me was like a red rag to a bull. I just wanted to go.
Yeah, man. So 2016, you guys go to like Mexico, South America. How was that?
Yeah. Again, hectic. That was awesome. Mexico is still to this day probably the popular favourite tour this band's ever done. We've done some amazing tours in Europe and played to some amazing crowds and played with some amazing bands, but on a enjoyment, life experience, awesome shows, ground level, real touring kind of sense, Mexico was amazing. We paired ourselves up with a band that we'd met a year earlier, I think, or maybe 2 years earlier. We did our first European tour supporting Hyrax, and the band that were playing before us were a Mexican band called Piranha. They were a fantastic thrash metal band, and we got along well with those dudes, so they invited us to Mexico and organised us a 2-week tour, I think. We did a lot of small towns, a lot of halls in dusty villages, the usual clubs in Mexico City, the kind of drives that you can't do during the night because they're cartel controlled roads, bribing cops to keep shows going, hectic shows in backyards with drum kits that are held together by gaffer tape and guard dogs on the roof. And man, it was hectic. It was so much fun. It was a life experience that I think the band will never forget. Really responsive. I think we got our first Facebook fan page from Mexico, which is awesome. Really responsive crowds, and I got to say, there's something about Mexican bands in thrash metal. They do thrash like no one does thrash. It's just something about the style of music, the energy that they get, and they replicate well. So we played with a lot of cool bands and met a lot of cool dudes over there. It was fun, and then we hopped straight from that into Brazil for another 2 weeks after that one. So it was Mexico and Brazil back to back, and Brazil only got more hectic. Yeah, that was intense. That was a whole nother level playing those shows. They take it very fucking seriously over there. I mean, they've got such a lineage of bands that have come out of South America and particularly Brazil, that they don't suffer mediocre bands, and they take the respect for their bands very seriously. So you definitely have to enter their market as a band ready to pay respect and a band ready to prove yourself, which I think a lot of bands would find confronting. I think a lot of European bands that go there find it hard to tour there. But for an Australian band, I mean, we're such a faraway market, and I feel like Australian bands have to go through so much just to exist and to justify a crowd in a room, that going into a market like that suited us perfectly. So it was another pretty memorable tour.
Yeah, nice. And then we get to 2017. I got my copy here, To the Gallows. Great album.
Awesome.
So what do you remember about, recording, writing, all that kind of stuff?
Man, I remember To the Gallows was a rush. Like it really was. That we recorded it just before those two tours we were just talking about. I think it was between tours. We had a gap between coming back from Europe, but we'd already booked the Mexico and Brazil thing, and we just had a window that had to get done. And I remember that whilst we had a lot of material we were stoked with, I remember feeling that it was a really intense period. Like we were kind of burnt out really, because we were coming straight back from doing runs, then doing Australian runs, living normal lives that we were trying to keep down jobs and pay the rent in the background. And I remember going into those sessions pretty burnt out in my body and mind. So I listen to the album and I hear a lot of really, really militant stuff that only comes out when your band's been playing shows and shows and shows and shows. But I also hear dudes who were right on the kind of angry edge of worn out and kind of almost resenting having to do it at that point. I can kind of, there's a certain angular sound to that album that I always hear when I listen to it. I don't think it's a negative thing. I just think it's a very, that's my main memory from it, was how are we going to make our bodies and our minds do this in time to get it out and released before we go back overseas. Yeah, intense period.
How does the songwriting work with you guys? Like, are you bringing stuff? Like, is everyone sort of adding things?
Yeah. Traditionally, I was the main songwriter, and I would, it was the classic James and Lars type of setup. I would bring concepts into the room with the drummer and workshop them until they are at least a framework, and then involve the other dudes to build the house up from there. It always starts as a guitar and drum, at least the skeleton of a song before the meat got added to the bones. I found though, for the album that we've just released 2 singles off, and for the writing of the next record, that there's an end date to that type of writing, because that type of writing puts a lot of pressure on the individual, and also relies on the ego of the individual being able to maintain that control of, I'm writing good content, I am the best version of this. And I think that comes to a peak at some point in your life where you realise that it's not really relevant, and that the culmination of the people in the group are going to reach the best results. So this album, we actually, for the first time, we wrote very collaboratively in the room. I mean, most of the ideas would still come from me, but I'd involve everybody at a very early stage, whether it was on a production sense or whether it was on a writing sense, to help form up the song from a much earlier point. And I think it's strengthened the songwriting a lot and taken us outside of the cattle gates of my world. It's taken us to a larger sound and a more mature sound, which is very welcome, very welcome.
So 2018, you guys bring out a single, couple of covers on there. You got the Wasp cover and an Airborne cover, yeah?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you guys toured with Airborne around that time, right? Is that why you kind of decided to cover one of these? Yeah.
So we'd just gotten off tour with them that the European dates we did with Airborne were by far the largest crowds and biggest shows that Desecrator had ever been exposed to. And it was a game-changing tour for us because for the first time, we were not the middle-of-the-road band on a tour package. We were the extreme band. And I mean that from, say, on the Overkill tour, we were playing before Crowbar every night. So they're much heavier than us. When we toured with Venom Inc., we were playing before Vital Remains every night. So there's always, Desecrator has had the history of being the clean vocal band or the traditional thrash band on a lot more extreme packages. So it was really nice to play with Airborne, who are quite a supercharged rock and roll band. And their fan base in Europe is a core heavy metal fan base, but they're the kids who have the Metallica and Slayer patches, but they listen to AC/DC, you know. So it was nice to be the band that pushed the envelope on that tour, and it worked really well for us. We the energy between our band and their band really seemed to translate on stage every night. And yeah, it was an amazing time. It was just an amazing trip. We played to crowd sizes and venue sizes that the Desecrator hadn't ever had access to, and we really got a chance to prove ourselves in that kind of large club, large theatre, small arena type of way, which had always been a dream of ours. So it helped us a lot in the European market because it broke us out of the cattle gates of thrash metal. So I guess when we got back, we'd already planned to do the Manic single because we needed something to bridge the gap between doing that tour and writing the record. But I think it was just one of those ideas that we wanted to kind of put a marker on how much fun that tour was. And I think to a degree there's a real, and I've got a totally vested interest in saying this because they're mates of mine, but I think there's a real unappreciation, like not under appreciation of that band in Australia. I think that people don't realise just how much of a big deal they are overseas and just how great they are. Like, I think we tend to, in Australia, we like something until it gets to a certain point and then we start to tall poppy it a little bit. And I think Dave unfortunately suffered from that. So playing one of their earlier songs and their more kind of Metallica influenced songs, I guess, was something we wanted to do to just kind of remind people that they're part of our scene and our culture, you know. Yeah, it was cool, man. We really enjoyed doing it. It was just a lot of fun. It was a fun day in the studio doing the two covers. The Wasp cover was purely because we listened to Wasp all the time on the road. The amount of Wasp that gets played in the Desecrator camp is out of control. So we're like, we got to finally do this thing. So yeah, fuck like a beast.
Excellent. So 2020, pretty shit year for everyone. You guys play a seated Melbourne show. So one of your songs, Thrash is a Verb, you know, no one sits down at a Desecrator show. Were there people moshing in their seats? Like, how do people get into it in a seat?
You've never heard a crowd yell, no one sits down at a Desecrator show more at me than at a fucking seated Desecrator show. We didn't even play that song. It was... Yeah, it was intense. We've done 3 of them now. You could say fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it. You could say fortunately in that we've gotten to play shows in a time that a lot of bands haven't, and you could say unfortunately it's quite an awkward transaction if you don't know what to do with it. But the first one was quite different to the second two. The first one was after the first big lockdown that Victoria had. It was a really, really long time of nothing here. You know, we had all the 5K limits, the can't leave your home, all that stuff just dragged it on and on and on. So when that first lockdown ended and I got the call to ask if we'd be interested in doing a show, I think it was about 100 capacity or 80 capacity you're allowed to have. And there was a real kind of excitement to just get people back in a venue. You know, venues needed it, bands needed it, and punters needed it. So there was a lot of kind of thriving energy about people hadn't had a show for a year. You know, they hadn't had a local show. They hadn't been out and been able to sit with their friends and have a beer amongst loud music. So it was a really intense time. And I think we were one of the first shows to do that in Victoria. We were definitely the first metal show to do it in the Bendigo Hotel. So it went really well, man. Like people, as you'd expect, you know, people were finding it very hard to contain themselves. We actually sold it well enough that we ended up playing a matinee show that day as well. The nights sold out a lot faster than we were thinking. So we ended up playing an afternoon show, which we thought, well, you know, if enough people turn up, we'll just take it easy and that can be a warm-up for the evening. But then that sold out too. So we're like, right, people really want this. We better really turn this on. We paired the show up with a band called True Believer, who are an awesome Victorian, traditional kind of deep purple sounding heavy metal band. They were a perfect opener. And it just got legs. There were chair mosh pits. People did everything they could to stay within the legal bounds whilst push the envelope beyond a point. It was a very memorable night. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube actually that you can see. I think there was a dude who filmed a couple of songs. You can kind of see the vibe. It had more energy and more excitement in the room than shows I've played in regional towns to standing audiences historically. You know what I mean? Like, we've definitely played to colder audience. This was at least, it was 200 Desecrator fans who were excited about being back in a pub. So it was pretty hard to contain them. Yeah, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we got the opportunity to be part of moving forward after COVID. And to not just sit on our hands like a lot of people did and say, oh, we're just going to wait till it gets good again. Because if bands don't actually take the opportunity to make it good again, it won't be good again. There will be no venues, there will be no gigs, there will be no crowd. There will just be people in their bedrooms wishing those things existed. So we made the active decision to be part of the rebuilding, and I'm glad we did. Having said that, I probably don't ever want to do it again because I'd like to play the standing crowds, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Earlier this year, you guys re-released Live Till Death. I mean, it's cool to see it re-released, but was there something specific that prompted that?
It was a 10-year anniversary. We'd always wanted to reissue it because it only ever came out on CD. It came out on tape, I think, in America, but it came out on CD only. So we'd always planned a gig to celebrate the 10-year anniversary, to release it on record and to play it start to finish one more time. Unfortunately, COVID put its stamp on that and really made that awkward. We ended up, instead of playing one show that had sold out, we had to split the tickets over 2 nights and play 2 seated shows just to get the capacity of the crowd in, which kind of dampened it a little bit. There was a lot less excitement, I guess, because it's the third lockdown by then and people are a bit over it. But we still, I think we made a memorable night. There was a lot of tomfoolery, a lot of action, and it was good to see a lot of the old guard who were kind of there the first time came out to support it. So it was a fun thing. It's great to have it on vinyl. I think it was always meant to be on vinyl. Like, the sound of the album, the raw sound of it really suits Blacks. But we never quite focused on getting it done. I guess we were just so focused on touring that we never really put money into releasing it. So it's nice to have it out. I think there's a few copies of it left. So if anyone wants it, we got it. But yeah, it was a get that done, celebrate the 10th anniversary, and then pretty much a day later, release the excitement of a new album.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you spoke a little bit about it earlier. How's the writing and stuff? You're saying other people a bit more involved. Does that mean Desecrator's sounds changed a bit as well?
Yeah. I think that I've got such strong songwriters around me in Desecrator that I've really come to appreciate their input and their stamp on the songs and on the material. So this one was a lot more a lot more collaborative between the four members. The addition of Muggsy on guitar, who's the frontman of another band, Harlot, he really kind of helped me break out of my own head songwriting wise. Having such a strong songwriter in him come in was really challenging and great. And he had a really good perspective on what he liked about Desecrator, having been a Desecrator fan and a guy who was in our mosh pit since he was old enough to come to gigs. His perspective on what the band was compared to mine is very, very different. He could really highlight what he thought were the key points of the band and what people were enjoying in a way that I can't, because I'm too close to it, because I'm the dude in the band. So yeah, it's really broadened the sound. I think after that Airborne tour too, we made some really conscious decisions to review what worked to those crowds and what didn't. You know, what went over those people's heads, what kind of they couldn't translate to, or what didn't work to them, as opposed to what was working in the smaller clubs that we were used to. That taught us a lot. You know, playing to 2,000 people a night and watching them move and watching them react to different points of your songs, it really starts to show you what works and doesn't in a live setting. So taking that on board as well, I think it was time that the Desecrator kind of matured songwriting wise. So we consciously did a lot of that. I mean, having said that, we haven't done a hard left into a different genre. If you listen to the album, it still sounds like a Desecrator album, but it sounds like, I think, all the things that work about Desecrator and all the things that we like about other people's bands all in one, you know?
Yeah, nice. So it comes out August 27th. Is there, as much as possible, we got touring plans to back it up, like get it out there?
Yeah, we do. We just launched a tour. We just launched a national tour. We've got our fingers firmly crossed that we'll get to do it. I mean, who knows? It's Australia is such a touch and go thing touring wise at the moment. But again, as I said before, you've got to be in it. Got to give it a go. Can't just sit back and not try. So we've got East Coast dates. We've got regional dates. We've got a WA date on there. So we're gonna give it a go pretty much from September through January. We've spaced it out a lot more than we normally would, and we've done that on purpose because we figure there will be at least a few reschedules due to lockdown. So we've given ourselves the breathing room to not have to hopefully cancel, but be able to just move things here and there. But yeah, that's out there. Those dates are out online. The tickets are on sale for that, and the response has been really good. So we will tour this summer once the album's out, and try and flog a few copies.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, look, Riley, thanks Steve for your time. Thanks for battle jacking up with me as well, and hopefully, I'm pretty sure November's the first show from memory, so hopefully I'll see you there, man.
Yeah, man, I will look forward to a beer. We love coming over to Perth. It's been a really historic, not historic, but historically, Perth has always been a favourite of ours. We've got a lot of friends over there. We've got a lot of history playing there. I think very early on we started going over and playing shows, and we love being there. So it's one that we always try and put on the tour because a lot of bands don't. So we'll see you there.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks a lot, man. Cheers.
Cheers, pal.